Good evening, everyone. Karthik Bharata this side from JCRC University. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome you in a today's Tech Talk. First of all, thank you so much for joining in today's. Whenever we hear learn about open source, get inspired by real world journey, or just explore what lies beyond the code, this session promises to be something truly special. We are joined by today's guest whose work spatially directly to the heart of open source is really about access, empowerment, and community. Please welcome Paveen Kumar, a senior engineer from Mathesar Foundation, an organization that built powerful tool to make working without database easier from everyone, not only developers but also for non-tech users. At Mathesar, Paveen's help building a open source spreadsheet styles interface for PostgreSQL allow people to interact with complex data in simple and imitative way. Imagine using a database without writing a single line of code, single line of SQL. That a kind of innovative he has enabled. But beyond the code, Paveensh is deeply passionate about exclusive design, demonstrative community collaboration, and make open source feel welcoming. He also been a part of large open source moving through FOSS United and Chennai FOSS, where he shared his insights on bring the gap between the technical system and the real human needs. So please join with me. Welcome the guest with a warm emoji shower.
Hi everyone, it's nice to be here. Am I audible enough? Can I get a thumbs up if
Yes,
everything's
sir.
working good?
Yeah.
All right, it's great to be here. Karthik, I assume you're the host. Nice to meet you and nice to meet all of you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to, I have a boring presentation of about 15 slides. It's going to be mostly an engaging conversation, kind of like a podcast style conversation. I would appreciate that more. But this presentation is just there to share with all of you. I think we can. Let me know when we can get started. Can we get started right away?
Yeah. Over to you, sir. Yeah, you can start.
Okay, thank you. So I hope I assume that most of you on the call here know about open source software. But before we move on into how you can contribute to open source software, how you get started with open source software, I want to give you a general introduction of what open source software is and why it is important. And let's start with what the term open source even means. Now, when we say open source, it's not just related to software, it's a culture. So it's a way of thinking and working together, essentially, where all of you are working for free and you're contributing together and you're improving on something that you're commonly working on. It could be anything. You could be building a tree house together, right? So a bunch of people together, you're building it, you're making plans, and the collaboration is open. Everyone is welcome to see what's happening, and it's transparent. And this entire way of working, this way of thinking, is what we call open source. Now, this started with software, and it still denotes software to this point. Open source hardware is becoming popular recently, but it hasn't moved on from the tech domain to other domains. So it's still in exclusive to tech domain at this point, and it's not very well known outside the IT domain. And because of that, a lot of people don't really understand the impact of open source on today's world. So here are some questions I've heard from my own coworkers, not recent, like from my past, and other friends who've talked about open source. And whenever I try telling them what open source software is and that whatever we are working on as engineers, as tech people, is entirely based on open source software, the first question is like, how is this even legal? How is it you're just taking someone that's free, something that's free, and you're building and selling it and making money? How? There has to be something wrong. There has to be a catch. No one gets why it is even present. And if when we tell about the open source contributors in general, people go, wait, so a bunch of people, random people, they work together, they build something, and they put all this effort, all this time and energy into it, and simply they give it away for free. And they don't, why is this happening? Like, they don't understand who will even do that, who will even do something for free. And that's a question that many of you might have as well. Why am I putting all this effort into building something and giving it for free, and I'm not getting a lot out of it? But in order to answer that question, we have to first go back into why this even started. We have to go with some history of open source. Now, most of you might know this, some of you might not. Let's begin at the early stages of computing. So at that point, people were treating code as a commodity that is freely shared. You're building hardware and you share the code. You let people tinker with it. You pay, if you're creating a device, let's say a printer, you make people work with it. You allow people modify the software in it, right? That's how it started. And because of this, an entire hacker culture was born. People loved tinkering with software, playing with it. It kind of became a hobby for many of them. And during that time, somewhere around the 1980s, something happened. There was a printer in the MIT AI lab where Richard Stallman worked. Richard Stallman was an engineer there, and he had modified the software the printer software for the previous printers so that if the printer gets jammed, they were in different buildings, so whoever gave the job will get a notification saying, "Hey, the printer is jammed. Go to the building and fix it," or if it's ready, go to the building and fix it. So that is something he created on older versions of older printers that were there in their MIT AI lab. And what happened was they bought a new printer, and this printer, Xerox, did not allow access to the source code. So this became a frustrating thing for Stallman. So imagine you are buying a table, right? And it's your table. And if you don't like the table, you can cut the table into parts. You can design the table however you like it. You can modify the table into, take the wood apart and build a cabinet out of it. But you can't do that with technical devices that have software running in them. You should be allowed to. And this caused a series of events, and the free software movement was started because Richard Stallman felt that I need to be able to modify the software that I have access to. This is something that we bought. We bought a printer. I should be able to do something on it. And it became sort of this rebellious freedom movement where they started advocating for, I need to be able to freely use the software, to study, to share, to improve, to modify this, to give it to others and work with it collaboratively. And the entire GNU project was born out of it. And when you say free, many of them think it's free of cost. That's not the term. That's not what free means. Free actually means it's freedom, free to modify. It's you're free to use it however you like it. It doesn't mean you're free. You have to give it for free, free of cost. And this movement was quickly caught upon, and a lot of people started, contributing to it, working with it, following this. The GPL license was introduced, and to make sure that the software remains free and open, still being followed to this date. And in 1991, Linus Torvalds introduced a new kernel or created a new kernel called Linux. And this is the mail that he first sent when he was introducing Linux to the community. And as you can see, he basically says, "Hey, I have something free operating system. It's a hobby. It won't be professional." We all know how that turned out to be. This was the mail that started the work on Linux, which quickly grow into the biggest, one of the biggest open source softwares out there, with so many people contributing to it, creating an entire ecosystem from it. And then in 1998, they came up with the term open source because, as I said before, when you use the word free, you start to think, okay, this should be free of cost. This should be something that needs to be given for free. Then they realized, okay, this is confusing. People are not understanding what free means, so we need to redefine that. So they termed the coin open source. And after that, a lot of companies started paying attention. And fast forward to today, every IT infrastructure out there is being supported by open source software. It's the basis of everything that we as computer software engineers or software developers are building upon. And it has become an essential infrastructure for IT as a whole, and which has also led to this massive growth of the IT industry compared to any other industry. And I would say it's all because of open source software at its core. And we come back to the point where we are at the reason for this call. Why should you, as students, even be concerned about open source software? Why does it matter? Why should you start contributing to it? Here is what you get, right? When you contribute to open source software that is out there in the real world, you are doing something, you're learning by creating software, right? So this is real code that is being used somewhere, it has real impact. You're not working on a project that you do just for your college and it isn't very useful outside of it. You're doing something that has real impact in the world. And it provides you an experience of what it means to work with an actual team, a team that is not in the same office, not in the same building, completely distributed. You have to work across all of them, navigate that working with teams, and again, it helps building your resume for sure. It also introduces an aspect of networking. It gives you the ability to meet with people, people who are in the industry, and get any sort of all forms of mentorship from them. And this is all possible because open source software is, well, quite open in the public. And why you should get started now when you're students is because academia is a great place to start exploring this. You don't have a lot of when you once you start working, you get a lot of additional responsibilities that you need to deal with. And if you have a full-time job building software, and then you build it and then you try to contribute to open source, it's not going to be easy. Right now, getting acquainted with it is going to be far more ideal, easy. And the core values is open source stands for this way of sharing, learning, and this whole a feeling of a community to work with, which is very ideal for all of you as students. And this is a great place for you to be to start contributing to open source software. Uh, so, I think, do you want to have some questions for me, Karthik, before we move on, or anyone else from the audience?
If anybody is having any doubt till now, they can just ask in a Q&A question. I'm going to read it out.
Okay, cool. I mean, you can feel free to interrupt anytime. Just ask a question. I will, answer it.
Excuse me, Pawan, can you please? Okay. Then. Anybody's having any doubt, they can ask the question in a Q&A form.
And please don't not just doubts. Just treat it like a conversation. If I'm in the room sitting with you, we're just talking about stuff. And if you have anything you want to ask, feel free to interrupt. Right.
Uh,
So,
yeah,
yeah, Karthik.
I have a doubt. So, how did you find a project that felt like the right fit where you were starting out? When did you when as you said that this is a perfect time to start the open source? Is it like
Mm. Okay. I'll tell you. I did not start at college. I wish I had, but I did not. I started way late after joining work, and I was working, and I was using obviously a lot of open source software in the work. So whatever you work with, for example, you build software now. If you use the JavaScript ecosystem, you're building on Node, which is an open source software. You're using importing a bunch of libraries. Let's say you're using React, that's again open source. You're using the libraries, all of them are open source. And I was working on a project that used a bunch of open source libraries, and one of them had a bug in it. And it was annoying for me because I had to deal with that bug, and I decided to raise a PR for that bug, which did not get merged. They didn't even look at the PR because the PR was low quality at that point. I did not care about actually understanding the actual issues or how to properly contribute to an open source ecosystem. I closed the PR myself. But then that's how it started. And then every time I use an open source software and I found that okay, this is something I need to help them with or something that needs to be fixed, I started contributing. And that's how I began. The next step on was I was more clear on how to approach open source teams, how to you know understand the entirety of their library before you go in and provide a code. I mean, provide a code or raise an issue. And that's how I started. And I think I can show some examples towards the end of this call. We got a couple questions. Which are some of the best OSs that you use in daily life? Okay, I have a separate machine that has Linux in it, and I use that. I mean, I have Ubuntu on it, but and I use it quite often. And it is kind of my primary way of working with stuff. I have my work laptop or another laptop separate, but then that's my the best OSs if you ask me.
We have one more
And
question. How does open source software actually help to the creator?
it depends on what help means and what help you're looking for. One, if you're a student and if you're looking to learn, this is somewhere you can learn for free and you can understand things for free. You don't get that in any other industry. If you are, say, a doctor, you can't just go and say, I want to learn how to be work in a hospital for free. There's so many restrictions there. The open source does not have any of those restrictions. You want to get in, just start working with it. And again, as I said, open source doesn't necessarily mean free of cost. You can get paid for working on open source software. Otherwise, open source software will not exist. Now, if you take the Chrome browser, which is based on Chromium, and Chrome makes a lot of money, Google supports the project by providing them funding. And you take Android, Android is open source, and Google releases Androids with all its phones. The core software gets a lot of funding. And you can tell this about a lot of open source software that's used out there. Even Linux has a Linux Foundation, which operates on funding. So the creators do get paid for it. They are not completely broke. Of course, there are open source software which people do just for fun, that started out as a hobby and they don't have any expectations. They just build software and provide it out for free and for people to start using with. So eventually it essentially means what you are looking from it. If you're looking for fun as a hobby project, you're getting out of it. If you're looking to get recognition by contributing to the software, showing your skills to the world, that is possible. So it helps the industry, it helps the creator in all these different ways.
So,
And yeah.
what was your first open source contribution and how did you get into it? As you told that you
Yeah.
resist the PR and
And I close. Yeah, I will. That was a failed attempt, which will happen to most of you because it's a common experience. Because the first time you don't really know how to start contributing. I will. I think after I finish the call, I will answer that question by showing my actual first contribution. It's a very small contribution, but that will probably help all of you understand how to get with it. Okay, so there are a couple questions on finding the project to contribute and a question on my startup. I think I will answer them perhaps after this section. So, after 10 to 15 minutes. Right?
you can
Uh,
start.
Okay. So how do you get started with open source software? And the step is surprisingly easy. Just create one. You don't have to go and contribute to other people's software right away. The biggest advantage of open source software is anyone can create them. All you need to do is pick an idea, pick a project that you need. It can be something very, very simple, something that you use for your college, for your organization, or for yourself at home. Any project. My first ever project was an attendance system in college 10, 15 years ago. And that wasn't a there were a ton of projects already. That wasn't like a major project, but that was still something that I built, right? So you pick an idea, any idea that would be used. It could be very simple. It could be something that already exists. That's fine. And step two, I mean, create a publicly hosted repository. GitHub is ideal. You can use GitLab or you can even self-host if you're more concerned about having complete control over it. Give your project an open source license. There are a lot of licenses, and that's a separate conversation of its own. But some of the most common ones are the GPL variants and the MIT license. And open source essentially, I mean, builds upon working as a team and invite other people to it. Invite people that they don't have to be experts. None of you have to be experts. All of you need to do is try and build something. You don't have to know anything. You don't have to be, how to make the you learn by doing it. And You make mistakes, the code may not look good, that's completely fine. You start building in the open and you keep doing it consistently, right? It's like any other skill. If you want to take photos, you start by taking bad photos and you learn how to take good photos. The same applies for cooking, the same applies for everything else. Similarly, for software, start building towards a goal. If you pick an idea, if you pick a project, and if you start building towards it, uh, that's all it takes to continue be consistent and develop software. And if you work with people, the more you work with people, you understand how to coordinate, how to say, hey, I found a bug, who's going to fix this bug, or how to split tasks among you to build a particular software, which is very important to know. And that's all you need to do, and you become an open source contributor. That's it. The steps are very simple. You can do that today. You can just start it with it today. But remember, this is something that you have to keep maintaining. It's not like I build something today, I publish it, and I forget about it. You have to be consistent. You have to keep maintaining it. Even if you don't plan on adding new features, if someone else wants to contribute, you should be more welcoming and allowing them to contribute. And essentially, maintenance is more of maintaining the project itself and making sure it's going in a separate track and then coding. So coding is a very, very small part of software in general. Uh, Someone has a question?
Sira, have you, Sira, you have raised the hand. Is there any question? You can just drop the question on the Q&A part.
Okay.
Sir, I think you can continue. It will be.
Yeah, yeah. Now, not at the step two, the second step after you build your own software or you attempt to build your own open source project is to prepare for a mental shift, right? No one tells you this. This is very important. In our school education system, most of us are trained to compete, to work individually, to always study, write your exam, compete, become better than everyone else. But that's not how the real world works. The real world works based on coordination, based on collaboration. And open source is all about your ability to collaborate. It's a skill, it's a separate skill that you have to develop. It doesn't come organically. Collaboration is very important. And that is the mental shift that you need to take in order to be successful working with open source software and even working on larger teams. And you have to be okay with having disagreements and working through them. So as I mentioned earlier, don't worry about having to be an expert. You have to be consistent because expertise isn't a big deal. You're not solving a novel problem yet. I mean, unless you are at some point in your life, when you begin, you're solving something that has already been solved a lot of times. You just need to be willing to be consistent, to learn, understand, adapt, and use it in whatever you're building. And you have to be patient because when you are trying to contribute to open source software that someone else owns, you don't have control over it. And even though you're doing the work for free, they don't owe you anything. You don't owe them anything. So you have to be more respectful and be patient of their own plans for the software. And if let's say raised a PR for that particular software, and they are not okay with it, or they take a lot of time to respond, you still should have it in your mind that there is a chance that they may never respond. So embrace that patience as a virtue, and don't let these kind of situations stay away from open source. And this is a way of how you can look for projects to contribute to. I think one of them even asked a question on this. I think this will help. First, if you're already using any software, of course, you're on a day-to-day basis, you're using a ton of software, right? We are having call on Google Meet, for example. And there is a chance that you're using a lot of software that is open source. So whatever software you're using on a regular basis, see if it is open source and try to find that repo, follow that repo, keep up to date with the changes that's happening there. Or if you come across a project that's interesting, that's fun to work with, start following that project, right? Read their documentation, read their contributor guides, clone the project locally, try to run that in developer mode. Now, before I go into how you can find projects, this is what you can do when you find projects, right? And start using them in a more common setting. it could be personal, it could be for your school. For example, the project I'm working on has a lot of organizational use cases, but you can still use it for a personal use case like tracking your anime releases, right? And that's, funnily enough, that's one of the reasons one of the founders of the project, Kriti, started Mathasar. And that was one of the problems that she wanted to solve with Mathasar. Like, basically, I want to track all the anime episodes that I watched because there's so many, you lose track of it after a while. And these are all different ways you can use in your own for yourself. And once you start using software, you will obviously find a lot of issues with it, right? So if you're reading the documentation and following it, there could be a documentation issue, or the document itself could be very hard to follow. And or if you're using the software, there could be bugs, any bugs, small or big, you will eventually run across them. And when you do engage with the team, most often open source teams will have channels for you to engage with. For example, we use Matrix for communication. That will be on their website or their GitHub page, and ask them questions. Open an issue. Once you open an issue, you've made your first external contribution. So many of you think just coding is contribution. That's not the case. Everything that you do, document updates, opening an issue, telling them you support your software, and providing them feedback on how things can be improved. All of these are contributions. All of these are essential for the open source ecosystem. So this is how you start your first external contribution. Try by doing essentially a QA of that software, right? That's step one. This would be a great external contribution. And many times when you report an issue, and if it's small enough, you can also ask, hey, I found this issue, can I try to fix this? Or sometimes even the contributor will come back to you and say, do you want to try and fix this? And that's it. That's your cue to then start fixing that issue and getting your code merged into that project. Now, sorry. Uh, then this is something that I mentioned earlier, that if you don't find any issues, you can still search for the issues tagged based on these labels. They will usually have some label like good first issue or help wanted. And once you find them, try to understand and reproduce the issue. So the first step is always understanding the software and using it. And if there's an issue, reproducing it and identifying what needs to be fixed. And then you communicate with the team. Always try to over communicate, ask for the guidelines, ask how they can contribute, how you can contribute, and fix the issue, raise the PR, and be patient. So as I said, contributors are human beings too, and they have their day-to-day jobs, they're maintaining software, they have their own lives. They might take months before they even respond to you. So be okay with that, be prepared for it. And if the PR doesn't get merged, it's okay. It's all right. Again, as I said, you don't owe them anything. Don't have a lot of expectations. It is good to have expectations or the desire to want to do it, but then you should have that in a way where it's okay if they don't do it. Because as I said earlier, in order to become a contributor, an open source contributor, you can create your own open source software. You don't have to make someone else accept your contribution. That's not the only way. So the more and more you do, the more and more you'll get used to this. And this is step 5. Many of you might have already be aware of this and start applying for it. But these are all good things that you can start doing. Essentially, apply for Google Summer of Code. Many open source projects take interns from the Google Summer of Code. In fact, one of our co-workers also joined because they were an intern at Google Summer of Code and they did really well and they became a co-worker. And this is a great way for you to work with a real team or an internal team, not just by providing external contributions, by becoming a team member that can work with the team in a more closer manner. Right, so there are sites like Outreachy and Google Summer of Code, and of course there is Hacktoberfest, which is it's kind of this program where usually Octobers get a lot of low quality contributions. So if you're participating in Oktoberfest, make sure that your contribution during that month at least is a little bit significant. Every other month, if you have like a very small PR of, say, you're changing the spelling of something in your documentation and a few lines, right? Don't do that in October. Do that in any other month except October, because open source teams get a lot of PR during that time, and it gets frustrating if the PR is low effort. So if your Oktoberfest is good, but if you're participating in it, be prepared to participate on something more substantial, right? And as a bonus, you can join student-friendly communities. Force United is one that's operating in India. It's a good community. They have a lot of events. Or you can join the local tech and meetup groups. So those are all things. You can even form your own meetup group and discuss all of this regularly. And most importantly, start using, say, Linux as your default. So once you start using a Linux OS as your default, you automatically get exposed to open source software. You get to work well with the terminal. You get to, most software that come bundled with Linux or that you tend to use with Linux will be open source by default. So you'll have your way into the open source ecosystem, and that can get you acquainted with it and provide you with a significant advantage after you finish college and enter the mainstream workforce. And these are some links on how to find the projects I was mentioning. So it's like, for example, I can show you how some of them work, right? Right. So, for example, if you open up for grabs, it gives you a list of projects that have these labels called help wanted or up for grabs or good first issue that you can then sort by the technology that you're interested in that you already know, and you can open the project and for example, if you open it, it will go, you can go to the GitHub page, read their documentation, find what two issues are open and try contributing to it. So there are a bunch of websites like the good first issue that just tracks all the good first issue, and first contributions, which contains the contributor guide for every project out there. So for example, you can search for jest, and these are all so every project will have a different set of contribution guidelines, so you can read their contribution guidelines that will explain how you can get started, how to find issues, how to communicate to the team and everything. So most repositories will have this guide somewhere, and find it, and that's your way to how to start contributing to those repositories. I will share the slides with you later, so that you can have all the links to these, right? And with this, we're almost at the end of my talk. So again, breaking into open source is kind of the wording, which is a play, because you don't really have to break into something that's already open and available to all of you, and you can get started with it anytime. And there's nothing actually stopping you from contributing to open source. And let's make this a bit more engaging. I've been monologuing for half an hour now, so I'd love to talk with a lot of you. And if anyone wants to ask questions, rather than the QA chat alone, unless you want it to be anonymous, which is fine, you can still unmute and start engaging, which is also good with me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Parveens. That was very truly eye-opening. I love how you highlights not just how, but also the way of open source. So the floor is now open for some questions. Folks, please feel free to ask the question in a Q&A. For the time being, we have a question. I'll just ask you. Your LinkedIn mentioned you worked in a stealth startup. Can you explain what you were working on? What the startup now? Yeah.
That was a few years ago, where I co-founded a startup. It was a log management startup aimed at security. It was a security solution aimed at enterprises. And we worked for, I mean, we had the company for a couple of years and we weren't able to establish funding and we had to shut it down. But that was a great experience because that is when I learned being a good software engineer is not good enough to run a company. You have to learn more than just software. You have to learn how to market, how to sell, how to talk to people, how to network. That those are all skills that is way more than building software. So as I said, right, coding is the most easiest part of anything. It's hard now. It's hard if you haven't started yet, but then once you do it, it's also the most fun part of whatever you're doing, building, be it building a company or working as a team or working in a company. So what, more than coding, all the other skills that you develop is what helps you. And it took me starting an actual company to realize how essential all the other skills are to running a company. And right now, that particular company is closed, and I'm working full time with open source software at Mathasar Foundation. And I've had a few different experiences between then and now.
Yeah. So, Paveen, where do you see open source heading in the next few years, especially with the AI and the low code tools raising? So,
Yes, there's going to be way more importance on open source, not less. With all the AI models out there, where do you think they're trained on? Open source code. And so if you've been following the news, like OpenAI was at the peak until DeepSeek came in, and DeepSeek was entirely open from China, and that took the industry by storm. So people are now more focused on open source models because, as with any software that disrupts the industry, it always starts with a closed proprietary system until an open source model comes in and it takes over. Right? It could be anything. If it say take databases, like Oracle was this proprietary giant which had databases years ago. Postgres came in, completely disrupted our Oracle, and it took the stronghold to this date. And that's the case with open source software in general. And all the organizations know it, all the top organizations know it. And that's why they are more and more focused on open source software. Even Microsoft, for a long time, Microsoft was this kind of this evil, not evil, not to use that word because it's doing really great job recently, but it was mostly against open source, or I don't, it was mostly closed proprietary. And now Microsoft provides you, Linux with their WSL shell. They have some of the biggest open source projects out there, Visual Studio Code, for example, and they've been, I mean, they own GitHub essentially at this point, and they've been doing all of this work on open source because they understand how critical it is to their own infrastructure and to the tech infrastructure as a whole. So you can see by the example of these giants that open source isn't going anywhere. In fact, it's going to become more and more important as we move forward.
we have one more question. Switch to a Linux change more than just your OS. It shifts how you think and work. What mindset shifts did you notice when you made that shifts? And someone committing the on Linux, which distro would be the recommended to start with the confidently?
Absolutely. Okay, so a lot really. I installed Linux for the first time, I don't know, in college 10 years ago, and I have not liked any other operating system after that because once you start doing that, you realize the amount of control you have over uh, your machine, your system. It also becomes frustrating because everything will break every now and a while. Which, if you enjoy the challenge, every time something goes wrong, you get excited about, okay, there was an upgrade, something happened, let me fix this. I mean, that's not the case now. Most operating systems come really well fleshed out when you install it, but then it it the shift in mindset was that I started looking more deeply into how I'm doing things with my uh, you know, with my computer, or what other people might find trivial in their tasks. It wasn't the case for me. You install open source software, you work with open source software, you will find that it's a lot harder than you think because they don't have the funding that a proprietary system has. Even, for example, editing a video, I tried to use Blender like years ago, which wasn't really meant for editing videos, but to edit videos. And you can you sort of develop this mental picture of, okay, this is how you work with this is how you install it. Even many software provide you ways to actually compile and install from source instead of taking a package and dropping it or running an exe and finding an installer. And you learn how things work on the lower layers, and that kind of gets you, it kind of makes you understand how everything ties in together. uh, I mean, if you use other operating systems like Windows or Mac, they hide all the details from you. They really try to make it more and more easy to do stuff, which is great for my mom, for example, which isn't something that's great for me, because you have to know what's happening underneath to, actually be good at it. And if you find that interesting, you'll love Linux. And as for which distro, I would say, to say for, I mean, if you want to start with, you could go with Ubuntu or Fedora. Both are great. You can get started with them pretty quick, pretty easy to install. And the thing with distros is that once you start installing one, you will want to try everything else, and you'll keep trying. Then you'll want to change the desktop environment, and you'll install more and more desktop environment up until the point you're bored of it. It will take years. So I would say start with this, but keep exploring. Find the perfect combination of what you like, or create your own distro, which is completely possible, and have fun with it. Hey, I think,
Yeah.
like,
Praveen, I want to ask one thing. Let's be clear that most of the folks we are approaching to a second year now,
mhm.
and we have a most important question that everybody in mind. So, can open source work actually help you get an internship or a job?
Yes and no. It depends on how you approach open source. So, in order to, like, based on the interview, I mean, interviews I've taken, and the people that I've hired and the companies I've been hired at, it usually depends on how well you know a system, how well you build something and understand. So, essentially, it all drills down to your knowledge of building a software, for example, or coding and all of that. And where open source stands out is, if I'm hiring you and if I see your open source contributions, I will get a mental model of what you're capable of before even interviewing you, right? And that is something you cannot get easily. That's something that, open source contributions to open source make it easier um, during an interview process. And as you advance in your career, this adds to your value. Your contributions in the open are available for anyone to see, anyone to judge, anyone to understand, to make an assumption of how good you are at something, or how good you're at working as a team, which is what most people look, because coding is a skill you can easily develop, but the skill surrounding that is something that needs to be taught in most organizations after you join. But open source provides you that knowledge right from the beginning as you start contributing, of how to be respectful of everyone else in the team, how to engage with the team. And regarding internships and jobs, as I mentioned, Google Summer of Code, for example, provides a really great opportunity for a lot of you. And one of my coworkers was also hired because they were a Google Summer of Code intern. I mean, this was a few years ago. We took 3 interns, and we hired one of them into the team. And this happens more often than you think. You just have to be consistent at it. And, even if that doesn't happen, it still adds to your resume. Your contributions are always with you. And since you learn how to build a real world software, it you automatically understand when questions are asked towards you, it's easier for you to answer them because you've actually built it. Instead of doing projects that you can only explain the project, this one you can explain the process involved in the project. So yes, it definitely, most definitely would help in your career, but don't try to do it only for the sake of that, which it's still a great motivating factor, but should start building something yourself as a team, and then try to make external contributions.
Yeah. So, thank you, Praveen. We have one more question. Um, I noticed that Linux does not have a lot of driven support for hardware. How would you recommend we either get around this or learn to create our own driven? This is an important for to me because I plan the run to LLM locally.
Okay, Linux and NVIDIA drivers have had a, I mean, NVIDIA drivers have never really worked well with Linux for years. And of course, they're doing a better job at this recently. It is true that a lot of hardware doesn't offer first class support for Linux. But you also should keep in mind that most hardware will work out of the box. Specifically for LLMs, if you want to run them locally, my advice would be to have a separate machine or a bare metal installation without anything else, just a Windows machine that runs GPUs for you to help you run LLM and use Linux or use a WSL shell in Windows. If that is a scenario, instead of using the Windows UI entirely, prefer the WSL shell in Windows. So as long as you're consistently using Linux, however, in whatever form it is, whether through a WSL shell or as a separate OS of your own, you will develop the knowledge that is required to work with it on a daily basis.
Okay. Yeah. The another one, which tools or technology did you discover through a open source that you hadn't learned in your academic years? Did you make an effort to learn it?
Not real. I mean, that's a lot. The thing is, I've used software to build what I needed to build during my academic years. I did not know the best way to build something. I did not know the right way to build something. Even Git, I had not used Git throughout my academic years. I only was introduced to it at my very first job. Of course, it's not through open source, but then the thing is, our academic structure is still to catch up with the real industry standards, which keeps changing quite repeatedly. And what is important is that you need to stay on top of the loop. I did not. I made effort to learn how to build something, but I did not make an effort to learn the process around how to build something. Like what is the best tool? Like you can build software so many different ways, but in order to learn what is the best, you need to be working with someone who knows that. And open source, I did not discover them until I had my first job, but the technologies I discovered are open source. I didn't discover them through my open source contributions. As I started using more and more and becoming a better engineer, everything that I use are open source mostly. And then once you start making open source contributions, you're using the same technology, whether at your actual job or at whether you're contributing to so open source project, you use the same underlying open source technology. For example, you use Python, you use Node, and all of that are open source.
Thank you, Parmeens. Thank you, folks. I will request all the folks to ask question. Let's make this tech talk more engaging by asking the question. Feel free to answer the answer. Feel free to ask the question in a ask the question in a Q&A box. So, till the time, what advice would you give to the student who feel immediately by the open source community and a large code base?
That feeling of, if I'm understanding, you mean if you're
What
intimidated by
advice would you
something?
give to
Yeah.
a student who feel intimidated by a open source community or a large code base?
It's okay. Uh, Everyone feels intimidated the first time, and it could because I remember that I was already an engineer and I was still intimidated from making an open source contribution. And you have to be aware of the fact that they are just people. They are good at what they do because they've been doing it a long time and because they've been consistent. That's it. And you still engage them the same way that you engage your peers. Whatever contribution you try and make, they will consider you as a peer, someone who's trying to help, and you have to interact with them in the same manner. Even if you do not understand, be open about it. Be very clear about, okay, these are my limits. This is what I know. This is what I'm trying to contribute. I hope this should be fine. And the more you are able to communicate with them, the easier it becomes. My advice would be to be fine with it. It's okay to be intimidated by seeing this team of people that work together on an awesome project that you really like. At the same time, you can be one of them, and remember that that's all you need to know. So only thing is try communicating with them in their channels more regularly, so you will feel less and less intimidated by that process.
Okay, so next one is follow up to the LLM question. Will due to boosting be the function for this scenario?
Not necessarily, unless, I mean, it can be useful if you're only using one at a time, either Windows at a time or Linux at a time. But if you want to use them together, I would just say use a virtual machine. In a, I mean, you could just have Windows and use a Linux VM. That should be fine. Or not just a VM, you could even run that through WSL. Both should be fine.
Okay, what was the biggest learning you learned while building a non-tech technical user for open source? What was your biggest learning while making that?
That non-technical people are experts in their own domains. They just don't understand technology, which is fine. Not everyone needs to know everything, and just because they're non-technical doesn't mean that their views are invalid. It's important to know that they are experts in their field. It could be anything, and you could learn a lot from them as well. So it's all about working together here and being respectful with them. So you gain some of their expertise in their domain, and in turn they get some expertise in terms of the technical stuff that you're building. Even math is there. Something as simple as making databases easier to non-technical users, right? A lot of them that are using it are eventual people that can be using it, or scientists that are really good at what they're doing, right? So these are all research people that completely know what they're doing. They're just not great with software in managing their data, and this one will help them move towards their goal. So it's, if you when you're building for a non-technical group, a non-technical person, always remember that they are experts in their field, and try to gain knowledge from them while you're working with them.
Yeah, as we all get to know that open source is for to uplift our technical skills. So uh, I want to ask that how have you ever had a bad experience in open source? How did you deal with it?
Okay, bad experience in the sense it could be both as a contributor and as a maintainer. As a contributor, as I said mentioned earlier, I have raised my fair share of bad quality PRs, which no one has responded to, which has been fine. I mean, you learn that that's a process of how to deal with it as you move on. I wouldn't particularly call that bad experience, but it's more of a not a pleasant experience. And the same applies when you are a maintainer and you're maintaining an open source project, and you can obviously see students raise all these PRs. They try to contribute to the repository, and it's a low quality PR, and then you get really frustrated by it, and you don't know how to respond to them back to. So this is like the reverse of the same thing that you experience at the initial stages of contribution, and both of them are really hard to deal with. But as you move on, you learn how to engage, how to uh, you know work around this situation. The key really is over communicating. If something is bad, we have to be very clear. Okay, if this is not working, these are the steps that you can take, these are the skills that you still need to figure out. This is not solving the problem. Whatever it is, the more you over communicate, the better it is, especially when you're working in this open source environment where people are all over the world.
So, means, do you think the student need to be expert in coder to start contributing?
Not necessarily. I've told that multiple times. Like, you don't have to be an expert at coding, but you still need to know how a software development process works. That's why my first suggestion was to build your own software, right? And you need to know how to work with the tools. Especially, I see a question that asks, what is a PR? A PR is a pull request. So if you've used GitHub, uh, you can, if you have not, you should create an account in GitHub, and you can see when you create a repository. So repository is the place where all your code lives, right? It's the place where your project is, and it will have certain tabs that there's the set of issues that you can create essentially on the project. And a pull request is a merge request that you're sending. So you're actually sending code to be merged into their repository. So there is a bunch of code already, and you're fixing something, and you want your code to be merged into their code. So what you will usually raise is called a PR. It's called a pull request, and it's called different names in different uh, sites. For example, GitLab calls it merge request, even though both of them underneath they use Git. So this is a skill, like you don't have to be an expert at what you're doing. You just need to understand the tools. You need to understand how to work with Git, and how to work with GitHub or GitLab, and how to properly revision your software, how to create issues, how to coordinate with one another via the UI of whatever tool you're using, and how to run your code locally, download, clone the repo, go download locally. So the entire process is something you should learn, but you don't have to be an expert at the code itself.
So, Paveen, as we are moving to a July internship cycle, most of the folks will get the internship and most of are not. The one who get the internship, I want to ask that what help you to stay consistent with the open source while juggling the jobs and other works, right?
I wasn't consistent. I mean, up until quite recently, you start building it. It takes a lot of effort. After I, so I've been making smaller contributions whenever I notice issues in the software that I've been using and when I have the time. And after my startup failed, I decided to open source some of the components that I had until I wanted to take a break before I get find another job. So I took some time and I open source the most simple component that I had in my software that I had developed. In order to make it open source, you have to do a lot more than just put that component out there. You have to write documentation. You have to write, basically guide on how to use the component. You have to publish it for a public repo. You have to publish the built component so that other people can install it. You have to do all this additional work. And I did all of that for just that one single, very simple component. And after that, that itself took a lot of time. Like building the component was way easier than doing all of this additional work, because one, it's really boring to write a lot of documentation if you don't really find that personally interesting. And I like documentation, but I don't making it really good enough for everyone to use is hard, and it takes a lot of effort for me personally. And because of that, I only managed to open source one repo at that time, and I did not open source all my other components that I built over years. Right, I had so many that are just lying around. And after that, I found this opportunity to work for a company that exclusively builds an open source software, which is Mathasar. Mathasar hadn't started yet; it was just beginning. There was no project to begin with, and even the name Mathasar had just been created. And that's when I joined, and that's when we built Mathasar together to the point that it is right now. So I think the reason I'm consistent right now is because I'm working it as a full-time job. But otherwise, it's hard to be consistent at it, and that's okay. That's why you should get started now as students when you have the time, uh, because when you work a full-time job, it's going to become harder.
Okay, we have another one. How do you differentiate between the popular OSS project and a valuable one? Do GitHub stars even means anything now?
Yes, GitHub stars mean everything. If you are using an open source software, forget contributing to it. Like when you join a company, you're going to use an open source software. You're going to pull in, I mean, you're going to use a library. There are two libraries, say, that do the same job. The first thing you look for is this recent? Are people currently working on it, or is this abandoned? When was the last commit? And then you see how many stars does this have. Okay, this has a lot of stars. Then you say, okay, is this being backed by some foundation or anything? So you take into factors all of that, like how many contributors are here. If it's just one contributor and that contributor no longer works in that software, that's it. That software becomes abandoned and it becomes your responsibility to take it, right? So stars is a metric that is very important. The number of contributors is a metric. How regularly you're getting contributions is a more important metric, because you need to know that the software is up to date. And these are all different metrics that you generally use in deciding whether or not to go with an open source project for something. And yes, the stars absolutely means a lot.
Okay. We have a next one. Would AI help in doing the documents for publishing the OSS?
Yes, absolutely. It will help with a lot, but as with everything, you need to provide it all the information in order for it to polish the docs for you. It cannot, I mean, of course, it can try to create docs, but up until right now, I haven't found anything that's been super, uh, good at doing that. Some have come close, but not close enough. So it would. I think that they'll get better, and they will help a lot with documentation, but it would still lead a lot of input from the one building the software.
As you are an open source expert and we all get to know about many things about open source, so what is the biggest myth about the open source you likely to burst it? Yeah.
Like I said, the biggest myth is you think open source is some kind of a club of expert developers that they know what they're doing and they're out there, they're building all of this stuff, and you're just using it. And that's not true. And you don't have to be an expert to work on open source software. The people who are doing it are not really experts. They're just people that are really, really love building something. And they're just consistent at it because they love doing it. And uh, that all this intimidation factor, all of this comes from the fact that it's being built in the open and anyone can see your code, which is good because anyone can tell you when you do something wrong. That helps you develop. The reason open source contributors become better developers is because, particularly because your code is in the open. And if you put anything out in the open, it's important that you make sure that it is good enough to your own standards. So the biggest myth is that you don't have to be an expert to start working on things.
Okay. So do you think OSS maintainers should start training LLM as contribution? If so, do you even being a relevant trust with AI generating code?
Yes and no. Again, I think it depends on each team and each person's personal uh, preference towards LLMs. And LLMs are great, really, if you have very particular issues that just needs grunt work that is very obvious. And if you detail it out in a spec and you use them to build things, but I think a truly agentic LLMs are not good to the point where their code makes a lot of sense to just see the PR and review it, unless it is the issue itself is too narrow. But LLMs are good as collaborators, as in to help you get better at whatever you're doing. So it's important that you should first understand everything. You should know exactly how something should look and work like, and then you use LLMs as a tool, as you do with everything else, to build that. And at least at the present moment, I don't think they are great enough to use in a established repository that has a lot of users. But it is really cool to use that at your hobby projects that you want to keep around. And I think it will get better with time.
So at the last, I want to ask one more. How can someone pick a meaningful project to contribute to, especially when there are 1,000 out of there?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I mean, there are a few links that were in my uh, the slides that you can use to narrow down projects, find ones that are explicitly marked as good to start working with for first time contributors. And also, as I said, if you find any open source, if you use Linux and then you find an open source software, say to manage your photos, right? And you like that software, and so you find bugs in it and you want to contribute to it. So that is always, so especially if you like something and you're contributing that to that particular project, you will be more involved because you're already using it and you know exactly how it should work or what is wrong with it. So that gives you more context in terms of you being a user to the same software that you're using. So if you find any software, try to use it first in whatever way it is meant to be built. Use it regularly. You will gain all the knowledge needed to contribute to it. And I did mention how I will show you how to make your first contribution and how I made my first contribution. I can share it to actually show how small it was, but that was the starting point of all my contributions after that. This was like uh, at this point, I had already had a job. Is it being shared? Okay, this is in 2019, which is about what, 7 years ago, I guess. And at this point, I was already building my startup, and I was using. So this was my first actual external contribution that got merged, right? And I was using Vis.js for chatting, and one of their components, the timeline library for chatting. And I noticed that it included another library by default, which I didn't want to reduce the package size. So I raised a very small PR, and all it does, it adds this documentation to README, right? So it adds this documentation and a little bit of configuration to make that work. So that's it, like 18 lines of documentation. And I didn't know if that they would be okay with it. I didn't even need it to be merged because I'm already using it in different capacity, and I wanted to. I mean, I was already doing this locally, and I wanted to get it merged in their repo because I thought it'll be useful for others as well. And turns out it was the contributor. I mean, this was just a PR. There was no open issue. I just raised it. I didn't know it will get accepted, and they did. And I was very excited that they accepted it, even though it was a very small contribution. But what happened is, after they merged this, they created another issue saying, "Hey, this is now done, and because of this, I want to do this other thing, which is now possible because we have this PR that has solved a problem, and based on this, I want to improve upon it." And that started a whole discussion, and which then, based on this discussion, they created another PR, which closed. I mean, which fixed. I mean, they did more work on top of it, and again, that raised another PR, which they did a lot more work on top of it, and all of this led to the entire project, developing on top of one PR that I raised because I thought it may be useful to them. And even though I was not involved in any of these discussions after the PR, I was still following it, and it was making it really exciting for me to see you did something and people are excited by it and they're building on top of it to make their project better. And this was one of the moments that really make me love contributing to external projects after that. And I've been contributing. I mean, this was my starting point on contribution. So as I said, this was a very small documentational change, but it was essential. It wasn't like a spelling change that you made. It wasn't just phrasing grammar. It was solving a real problem that you had, even though others may not have it. And you know that you had that problem and you solved it, and you just helping them do it. And after this, for all the other projects, I started, if I notice an issue, with every issue, I started asking, hey, can I also contribute to fix this issue? I noticed this. And many of them are excited to say yes because someone is already finding a bug in their project and offering to help. Why would you say no? And that's how you start contributing.
Yeah, thank you, Parveen, as for your wonderful answer. That was very eye-opening for us. So we have a last question in a Q&A part. If I want to stay useful, if I want to stay useful to a OSS world long term, what should I not focus on too much?
Don't be, I mean, it's not about what you shouldn't be focused on. It should be what qualities you need to develop. You need to develop patience because once you make a contribution, it doesn't go well. There's a good chance of that happening. You can't get worried about it. You can't get too dug down that you don't want to contribute to open source software. You have to learn to be patient. The other people are human beings too. They have their own lives. They're also doing it for free. They're also building something, for the world to use. And there is a chance that what you did was not good enough by their standards, which is okay, and that's common. So you need to develop that patience. And as I said at the very beginning, start your own open source project, even if no matter how small it is, start it so that next time something like that happens, you will empathize with them rather than feeling rejected. And that will really help you in the long term.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we wrap up the today exciting session with the breaking into open source with the Pameens Kumar. Thank you once again for being with us, for sharing your wonderful answers regarding open source. To all the attendees, thank you for showing up, engaging, and being curious. Remember your contribution, no matter how small, can spark real world change to a open source. Keep building, keep learning, and don't forget the first step for contributing with the open source. Have a wonderful evening.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.